Hi, welcome to lesson 8. You're almost there. Only 3 lessons to go. In this video, I'll show you how those Swift basics you've been learning about apply and relate to our Xcode project. By the end of this video, you'll learn how to write code in the view controller to manage and access the elements in the storyboard. I'm also going to show you what to do when your app crashes, which happens more often than you think. All right, let's do it. Right here, we have the Xcode project that we started back in lesson 4. Well, we're going to continue working on it right now. Let's jump into viewcontroller.swift, where I'm going to point out a couple of things to you based on what we've covered in the previous couple of Swift lessons. Starting from line 9, we've got import UIKit. Now, you definitely know what that is because you've seen it in the playground. UIKit is a library of code that's provided by Apple, and the import statement is basically saying to use it. Now on line 11, we've got class viewcontroller. That is a class. Your view controller is a class, and you can see this is the starting curly bracket for it, and this is the ending curly bracket. So all of this stuff inside is part of the class. There are some things that I'm going to gloss over right now because you will learn about it in the future, and I don't want to confuse you now. And one of those things is this colon UI view controller part. It's something called subclassing, which allows you to build your class off of a pre-existing class rather than starting from scratch. But we're not going to talk about subclassing in this lesson. Just kind of keep in mind that that's what this part of the code does. Basically, view controller is a class that builds off of the UI view controller class. And down here, you have some functions. Now, there is an override keyword before the func, but ignore that for now. It has to do with subclassing. And so here's your function. It's called viewDidLoad, and then you've got an opening curly bracket and a closing one, and then the code inside here is the code for your function. Super is another keyword that has to do with subclassing, so we're going to ignore that for now. And same thing goes for this function, did receive memory warning. Okay, so this is another function. Isn't this cool? This was stuff that you were learning about in the past couple of Swift lessons, and now we can relate it directly back to our Xcode project. So your view controller is a class. That means for it to do anything, the view controller has to be turned into an object, right? So let's go into the main.storyboard and I'll show you something else that will blow your mind. Look at all of these elements that we added to the view. Are those objects? Are those classes? What are those things that we are adding and customizing to this view? Believe it or not, we're actually creating objects when we drag these elements onto the view. Well, you might ask, objects come from classes, right? What sorts of classes do these elements come from? Well, all of these elements in the object library down here in the lower right-hand corner, these are actually classes in UIKit. Stuff like this label, this button, text fields and stuff like that. These are all classes. And so now, this name object library is a little more significant to you, right? That's right. UIKit is actually a library of classes that Apple provides, and it contains useful classes such as buttons, labels, image views, all the stuff that you've been using and a lot more. For instance, by dragging and dropping this UI image view here, I'm actually creating an object of this class. Click it and check out the stuff in the inspector pane. All of these things that I can configure, they are properties of the UI image view class. You see, the interface builder here is simply a visual way to make it easier for us. Everything we're doing here in the storyboard, we can actually do through code. In fact, we can completely omit using the storyboard and instead write code inside of the view controller here to create all of the objects, set their properties, and then place them into the view. However, that is definitely more of an intermediate to advanced thing that you'll eventually get to. For beginners who are just starting out, I highly recommend using the storyboard. So if these elements in the view here are objects, how can I get access to them from the view controller? That's where IBOutlet properties come into play. Let me show you how to expose these elements from the storyboard to the view controller as an IBOutlet property. Now there are multiple ways of doing it, but the easiest way is just to select the view controller here in the document outline to make sure that you have it highlighted, and then go over here in the upper right hand corner and click on this little icon that looks like two interjoining circles. This is what's known as the assistant editor, and it basically kind of splits your screen into two. So on the left hand side you can view your storyboard, and then on the right hand side you can view the code. Now I want you to go over here to this little breadcrumb navigation and make sure that where my mouse is hovering, yours also says automatic. If it doesn't, just go ahead, click it, and then scroll down to automatic here. You should see viewcontroller.swift if you've got it highlighted here, because basically the automatic setting will show what's relevant on the right hand side according to what you select on the left hand side. So if you've got the view controller selected, this automatic setting should be showing you viewcontroller.swift. The reason is because this view controller here, this node in the document outline, is actually the visual representation, or you could call it the object of this view controller class here. Now what I want you to do is on the right hand side in the view controller, right underneath class, like inside the class but above the view.load function, just press enter a couple of times on your keyboard to create a little bit of space, and make sure you don't do it here, but you do it here, right inside the class, right after that starting curly bracket for the class. So right here, create some space. And then on the left hand side in the document outline, click on this first card. This is the left card right here, and you can see that being highlighted. If I click this one, you're going to see the right card being highlighted. So go ahead, let's click the left one. We'll start with that. And now hold down Control on your keyboard, and while still holding that down, click this image view in the document outline and start moving your mouse and dragging it. You're going to see a blue line follow your mouse as long as you're holding now that control button and you haven't let go of the mouse yet. So drag it over here on the right hand side where we created that space, and you should see that little note saying insert outlet or outlet collection, and now you can let go of your mouse and you can let go of control, and out pops this little menu here, and you can see that the connection type is set to outlet and the object is view controller, and we're going to name our IBOutlet property now. You can ignore the rest here. Well, the type should be UI image view. You shouldn't need to change this. If you selected the right element here, you should automatically have this type as UI image view. Okay, so here I'm going to call it the left image view, like that, and I'm going to click this connect button. So there we have it. It automatically generates this property for us. Now this property is special in that it has this special keyword here, IBOutlet, and you can see that var keyword there, and maybe I should just minimize that pane so we have a little more space. And you can see this is the name that I gave the property, and this is the data type, right, that the property is going to hold. There are a couple of things that we're going to ignore right now. I'll explain it down the road. That is this week and this exclamation mark. You don't have to worry about that for now. But what you should know is that what we've just done is we've connected this element here, this left card view, to this IBOutlet property here, so that this property will actually point to this UI image view object. And since we have a reference to that object, we can use dot notation, like you learned in the previous lesson, to access all of the methods and properties of that UI image view object, right? So if we wanted to change that image, we could call functions on it, we could, set its properties, and we can do that. I'll show you that in a second, but right now I just want to go over some common mistakes. We want to double check that we've connected it right. So what I want you to do is go back here on the left hand side, the storyboard, and then right click your left image view. You can see that it even changed its name here. You can either right click it in the document outline here or right click it in the storyboard. Either way, it should pop up this little context menu for that element, and under referencing outlets you should see the property name, which is left image view, followed by view controller, this is the object which contains that property. This shows you that this element is connected as an outlet property to this class right here. And it also gives you this little X button for you to break that connection. If you don't see this, that means that you might have connected the wrong element. So let me show you how to fix that. What you're going to do first is you need to find out which element you accidentally connected. So what I would do is I would go right click this guy and then check, right click a couple of elements which you think you might have dragged. It could be potentially this card stack view, right? Because if you're clicking this, you might have accidentally selected the stack view instead. So sometimes it's just easier to connect it from the document outline rather than clicking it from here. But anyways, after you find out the one that you accidentally connected, go ahead and click X to break the connection, and then go back to the view controller here and then delete that IBOutlet property. And now you can start from scratch again, essentially. So again, let's do it one more time for practice. On the left-hand side here, I have selected the left UI image view. Hold down Control on the keyboard, click and drag over here, let go, and then I can now name my outlet left image view, and I'm going to click connect. Now, another mistake that sometimes happens is that you made a typo while you named that outlet property. So some people might just go ahead and correct it. Let's say they forgot to capitalize something and they might just change it here. I'm going to add a letter like that. Let's pretend I am correcting a typo. But if you do this, things will break. Let's go back to the left-hand side and right-click that UI image view. You can see here that the referencing outlet, it's connected to left image view, right? But I've just changed that property name to left image views. So when you run your app, it's going to be looking for that property to assign the object to. It's not going to find that property and it's going to break. So if you made a typo, don't just erase it or correct it here. You will actually have to just go ahead and delete it and then go back here on the left-hand side, right click this X to break the connection first, and then do it all over again. So hold down Control, click and drag it here, left image view, connect. All right, let's connect the other image view. So I'm going to click on this one, hold down Control, click and drag it here. Make sure you don't drag it into this existing outlet. You can see here it highlights the outlet in blue. You don't want to do that, otherwise you're going to have connected two outlets to the same property and bad things can happen. So just make some space if you need to and connect it down here. I'm going to call this the right image view, just like that. And you'll actually notice that this gray circle is filled in. If you hover over it, it tells you what it's connected to, see? And when it's filled in, that means it's connected. Let me just show you here. I'm going to break the connection in the storyboard here. Now you can actually see that it is turned hollow. And that means that this property isn't connected to anything. Now, I find that this is not the most reliable way to tell, because sometimes when you just open your Xcode project, it doesn't really update these little circles. So there are times when I know they are connected, but they still show hollow. So I wouldn't put too much emphasis on using this. But anyways, here's another way to connect your outlet. If you already have the property here, you can right click here, new referencing outlet. You can, this little circle here, you can actually click this plus icon. And you can, let's drag it to the view controller node here, let go, and you can actually select the property. Make sure you select the correct one though, right image view. And now you can see that this is filled in, and when you hover over it, it should highlight the right image view. But I wouldn't attempt to do it the way I just showed you. If you're not comfortable with things yet, just connect it using the Control, click and drag method. That's the easiest way for beginners to learn, I feel. So now go back down here under the stack view. We are also going to connect the labels. So there are two labels that we want to connect. This 0 under player. So hold down Control, click and drag down here. I'm going to call this the left score label. And for this one, click, drag, hold down Control as well. I forgot to mention right score. Now, before I connect this one, I'm going to purposely make a typo. Let's call it right score labels, like that. And when I connect it, I've noticed, oh man, I made a typo. So I am going to actually just correct it like this. You can actually see when I did that, this became disconnected. And if I right click my label here, it's still connected to right score labels, but I don't have that property. And I'm going to run it for you right now and show you what happens. So it's going to crash, and because we have Assistant Editor open, both the panes change to here. But it's going to highlight this red line here, which doesn't really tell us much. What you want to do actually is go down to the lower right hand corner into this console area where there's a lot of gibberish, but this is essentially where you can find the detailed error message. The last line tells you terminating with uncaught exception of type NS exception. That's basically just telling you that the app crashed. What you should do is you should scroll all the way up to the top usually, and you're going to find actually a more detailed error message, more plain English that you can read. The stuff here, blah, 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 blah. And then down here, this class is not key value coding compliant for the key write score labels. Now, this line might not make any sense to you. This class is not key value coding compliant for the key. But however, over time, when you see the same message over and over again, you kind of learn to understand what the cause of that is. And in this case, it's because it's trying to look for write score labels, but however, we don't have that property. You know, this is a heck of a lot more easy to understand than, you know, reading any of this. And this is just a generic message which doesn't tell you what's wrong. So in this console area, you scroll all the way up and then you read what the error message is. So let's go back to the storyboard and let's fix this error and resolve this crash. So we're gonna click on the storyboard. The left hand side changes of our Assistant Editor, and on the right hand side you should see the view controller. If you don't click on the view controller up here, make sure that this side is set to automatic like that, and we're gonna fix this write score label. So this is connected to an outlet that doesn't exist anymore, so go ahead and click X, and then we are going to take this new referencing outlet and connect it to a pre-existing one, and that's write score label. Right, so now this guy's filled in. If I hover over this circle, you'll see that this write score label is highlighted, so we know which one it's connected to. Okay, so now we've got 4 IBOutlet properties, and they are connected to these objects that are on our storyboard. And since these properties are outside of any functions and they're inside our class, we can actually access them from inside any function. So let's just do a little test here in viewDidLoad. For example, I can say left image view, right? That's our property name up here, dot, and then these are all of the properties and functions that are available for a UI image view object. And I can access this property called image, right? And then I can go ahead and I can set that and change the image. We're not going to do that right now. We're going to do this in the next lesson, but for now, I just wanted to show you that we can access this image view here, and we can access the image property using dot notation like that. So let's go ahead and delete that. So you know the image property that I just showed you? Let's click this button to go back to the single view editor, and let's click this button to get our inspector pane back. If I click this image view, see right here in the inspector pane, this image drop down here, well, that is the image property that I just accessed in the view controller, right? So if I set that with code, that's the equivalent of setting it here to one of these image assets. See, I can choose card 14, choose whatever, and simply by connecting this element as an IBOutlet property to the view controller now can write code to manage this element in the storyboard. Okay, so now the next order of business is how do we run some specific block of code or a function when the deal button is tapped here? Because essentially when this button is tapped, we want to run code that will change these images, right? Well, we can use something called an IBAction function. So very similar to IBOutlet property, but this one is a function. So let me show you how to connect that. We are going to go back to Assistant Editor. So let's hit view controller on the right hand side. It should be set to automatic view controller. And we were connecting the outlets up here because that's where properties go inside the class. But now for a function, we only have to put it inside of the class, right? So this last curly bracket, this one is the ending curly bracket for the class. So we want to put our function inside of the class, right? So you have to make sure that you create some space before this last curly bracket, right? This curly bracket is for this function, right? So right here would be a good place to put the function to run when the deal button is tapped. We don't have to write the function. All we have to do is go over here on the left hand side and click on the button element from the document outline, hold down Control on your keyboard, click and drag all the way here, and then let go of your mouse button and out pops this little guy. But before you connect it, change the connection type to IBAction instead. Okay, and the object is view controller. The name, I'm going to call it deal tapped, and you can leave the rest of it as is. The event is touch up inside. Now, touch up inside is basically the event when the user taps on the button and lets go of the finger while still within the button, right? This is essentially tapping of the button. There's also other ones. If you click it, there's like touch drag outside, touch drag inside. There's touch up outside, which is actually when the user taps on the button but slides their finger off the button and then lets go. So that doesn't count as a tap, and we don't want that. This is the one we want, touch up inside. Let's click connect, and now you can see that it actually connected a function, see func, and the function name is deal tapped, and inside it's got a parameter. You don't have to worry about what that is, but it's essentially the button that triggered that event. So in between these two curly brackets, that's where we write the code for our function. Hit enter a couple of times, and in here I'm just going to print out a statement so we can test it out. I'm going to say deal, like that, and in the next lesson we'll actually put some real code in there. But this looks like an IBOutlet property, except it's a function. You can see this keyword here, IBAction, and you can see this. If I hover over this, it goes over the button. Now, in terms of troubleshooting, similar to IBOutlet properties, if you accidentally made a typo or something like that, or you might have connected the wrong element, simply go ahead and let's delete this IBAction altogether. Let's right click that button, and you're going to see all of these events. Under touch up inside, it's connected to the view controller deal tapped, but I just erased that function so it doesn't exist. Click this X to break that connection, and let's go ahead and do it again. So I'm going to hold down Control, drag the button, let go there, and I am actually going to, oh, don't forget to change the connection type to action. I oftentimes forget to do that. And let's call it deal. I'm going to accidentally mistype it again. So deal taps, okay, I'm going to connect it and then realize, oh no, I made a typo. And then I go ahead and correct it here. But notice now it's not connected to anything, right? The button here, it's connected to deal taps, which I just got rid of. Now I only have deal tapped. So if you make a mistake like that, break the connection, and you can actually touch up inside, move to the right. And this is a little prone to error actually, because you might be hovering over the wrong circle. So if you just move your mouse over here, click and drag it to the view controller here, and you can select an IBAction function, and then you can see it connected, right? Or if you don't want to do it that way, just delete this, break the connection, and then use the control drag method and reconnect it. Oh, but anyways, let's test out this function here. So let's use print, let's use deal, like that, and let's run our app again. Now, if you don't see this and it crashes or something like that, then you've probably made a mistake connecting your outlets. So go through the troubleshooting steps that we've gone through in this video. Now, clicking the deal button, we should see something pop up in the console. So you can see each time we hit deal, this function is being fired and it's printing deal into the console.
All right, so in this lesson, you learned about IBOutlet properties and how they can be used to expose the elements in the storyboard to the view controller. You also learned about IBAction functions, which let you write code in response to events from the storyboard. You learned how to correct any mistakes you might have made when connecting IBOutlet properties or IBAction functions. And finally, when your app crashes, you learned about how to find that detailed error message, which is so crucial to understanding why your app is crashing. There's no worksheet for this lesson, but I highly recommend that you replicate what we've done in this video in your own Xcode project. And if your app is crashing, remember to go through those steps that we covered in this video. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel by hitting the subscribe button below. If you don't want to miss a single video, make sure you click that bell icon as well. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next lesson.